The night had become unusually quiet in that remote corner of Nova Scotia. Rain continued falling steadily, covering the area in darkness while almost everything around Bad Chad Customs had gone still. Inside the workshop, however, the lights were still on. The smell of welding hung in the air, tools were scattered across the floor, and an old American car remained suspended on the lift. Chad Hiltz was underneath it, working quietly as he carefully examined the vehicle. To most people, Chad was known as the unconventional builder who could transform discarded metal into remarkable custom cars. But Chad didn't look at vehicles the way ordinary people did. He noticed the smallest details, unusual sounds, strange marks, and anything that seemed out of place. He had developed an instinct for recognizing problems before they became obvious. And tonight, that instinct was telling him something wasn't right. Across the workshop, Jolene sat at a computer, studying information on the screen. Her coffee had been sitting untouched for so long that it had already gone cold. She had become more than just Chad's partner over the years. She was someone who understood the business, noticed patterns, and often caught details that others overlooked. While Chad relied heavily on mechanical instinct, Jolene approached problems through observation and careful analysis. For several minutes, the workshop remained almost completely silent. The only sounds were the rain striking the metal roof and the occasional movement of tools. Then Chad's voice suddenly broke the silence. "Jolene, come here for a second." Something about his voice immediately made her look up. She stood from the chair and walked toward the vehicle. "What happened?" Chad slowly slid out from underneath the car. His hands were covered in grease, but his expression was noticeably more serious than before. This brake line didn't fail on its own. Jolene crouched beside the vehicle and looked closely at the area he was pointing toward. At first, nothing seemed unusual. "You're sure?" Chad grabbed a flashlight and directed it toward a small section of the brake line. "Look here." Jolene leaned closer and studied the damage. The cut was unusually precise. It didn't look like ordinary wear, corrosion, or accidental damage. "That doesn't look accidental," she said quietly. Chad nodded. "That's exactly what I'm thinking." The workshop suddenly felt much quieter. Outside, the rain grew heavier, pounding against the roof while Chad returned beneath the car to inspect the surrounding components. Jolene stayed close, watching as he examined the wires and mechanical parts one by one. Then Chad suddenly stopped. "Wait." Jolene immediately moved closer. "What?" Chad reached farther underneath the vehicle and pulled out a small device that had been concealed near the brake system. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. They simply stared at the unfamiliar object. "Why would this be here?" Jolene asked. Chad turned the device over in his hands, carefully examining it from every angle. "This isn't a factory component." He rotated it again. On the back was a tiny black symbol, a straight line surrounding what appeared to be a broken circle. Jolene's expression changed almost instantly. "I've seen that symbol before." "Where?" Jolene quickly returned to the computer and began searching through old files. She opened one folder after another, moving through photographs and maintenance records until she suddenly stopped. "Here." A blurry photograph appeared on the screen. Chad stepped closer. The symbol was unmistakable. It was the same strange marking they had just discovered on the device hidden beneath the car. "Where did you get this?" Chad asked. Jolene took a slow breath. 2 months ago. It came from another vehicle. Chad's expression tightened. Which vehicle? The black Camaro. The one that lost steering control on the highway. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. They both remembered what had happened. The driver had barely survived, and at the time, everyone had assumed the incident was caused by a mechanical problem. But now, that explanation didn't seem so convincing. Chad stared at the photograph. If that same symbol was there too. Jolene quietly completed the thought. Then maybe it wasn't an accident. The words changed the atmosphere inside the workshop. What had started as a strange discovery had suddenly become something much more serious. If the same marking had appeared on another vehicle, there was a possibility that someone had deliberately interfered with both cars. Jolene immediately began searching through older customer records. She checked repair reports, photographs, service notes, and maintenance histories. Minutes passed before she finally turned the computer toward Chad. Look at this. Several different vehicles appeared in the records. Each had experienced an unusual problem. Some involved braking systems. Others involved steering failures or unexplained electrical malfunctions. But there was one detail that connected them all, the same symbol. The workshop suddenly felt colder. Chad slowly pulled a chair toward the computer and sat down. Someone has been tampering with these cars. Jolene looked at him with concern. But why? Chad remained silent for a moment, studying the information on the screen. Then he answered quietly. A warning. Jolene frowned. What do you mean? Chad looked back at the files. This doesn't feel random. Whoever is doing this wants someone to notice. Jolene glanced toward the garage doors. Rain continued pouring outside, turning the road beyond the workshop into a dark blur. For some reason, she couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. Then headlights suddenly appeared through the rain. Both of them froze. A black SUV slowly approached the garage and stopped near the entrance. The engine shut down. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the driver's door opened. A man stepped out wearing a dark coat. His expression was calm, almost unnaturally calm. He didn't appear surprised to be there. Instead, he walked toward the garage with the confidence of someone who already knew exactly what he wanted. The door opened, and he stepped inside. His eyes moved from the car to Chad. Is the car ready? His voice was completely ordinary, yet something about his calmness made the situation feel even more threatening. Chad wiped the grease from his hands and stared at him. Before we talk about the car, tell me what was installed in it. The man remained silent. Then a faint smile appeared on his face. You should stay a mechanic, Chad. Not a detective. Jolene quietly closed the computer. Chad stepped forward. The brake line was deliberately damaged. The man's expression barely changed. And this isn't the first vehicle, Chad added. For the first time, the man's smile disappeared. There are some things you should stay away from. Jolene immediately looked at him. Or what? The man turned his attention toward her. Or accidents happen. The words left the garage completely silent. Chad's expression hardened. Suddenly, the strange failures they had been investigating no longer seemed like isolated mechanical problems. The man said nothing else. He simply turned around and began walking back toward the entrance. But just before leaving, he stopped. He stood there for a moment with his back toward them as the sound of rain filled the silence behind him. Without looking back, the man spoke quietly. "We want the car returned. And it would be better if you forgot everything you saw tonight." Then the door closed behind him. A few moments later, the black SUV disappeared into the rain, leaving the garage surrounded by silence once again. Jolene stared toward the entrance. "These people are dangerous." Chad didn't answer immediately. He continued looking at the door for several seconds before finally speaking. "Yeah, but it's already too late now." Jolene turned toward him. "What do you mean?" Chad walked back to the computer and picked up the strange device again. His expression had changed. "Now I want to know who these people really are." Jolene's voice became uneasy. "Chad, maybe we should go to the police." Chad let out a quiet laugh. "And tell them what?" "That some secret group is turning cars into weapons." Jolene fell silent. It sounded unbelievable, almost impossible. But the evidence sitting in front of them was becoming harder to ignore. Before either of them could say another word, the computer suddenly switched on by itself. The screen flickered several times, and then a folder appeared without anyone touching the keyboard. The name on the folder immediately caught their attention: Project Blackline. Both Chad and Jolene froze. "I didn't open that," Jolene said immediately. Chad stepped closer to the screen, staring at the folder. Inside were dozens of files containing vehicle models, dates, locations, damage reports, photographs, and detailed notes. Several files had a single word marked beside them: completed. Jolene's breathing became slower as she tried to understand what she was seeing. "What are these people doing?" Chad didn't answer. He continued scanning the information until his eyes suddenly stopped on a newly added entry. "Next target confirmed." Beneath the message was a photograph of another vehicle. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. The uncertainty that had been visible on Chad's face earlier was gone. There was no curiosity anymore. Only determination. "If these people are really putting lives at risk," he said quietly, "then this is no longer just about cars." Jolene looked at him. "So what do we do now?" Chad turned toward the garage lights and then toward the dark road disappearing into the rain. His voice remained calm. "Now we find out where all of this started." Outside, the rain still hadn't stopped. But inside Bad Chad Customs, everything had changed. This was no longer just a strange mechanical failure. It was the beginning of something much bigger. Whatever Project Blackline really was, Chad and Jolene had just discovered something they were never supposed to see. The question was no longer whether they should get involved. The real question was whether they could still walk away.